My name is Heather, and at 32, I never expected my doorbell would bring a decade of pain right to my front steps. After building my tech company into a multi-million-dollar success, I'd finally found peace without the family who excluded me from every gathering for 10 years. But there they stood, all 15 of them, gawking at my mansion with plastic smiles hiding their shock. When I opened the door, I simply said, 10 years is a long time to suddenly remember your daughter exists. Before I share how this all unfolded, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button and give this video a like if you've ever had to create boundaries with family who only showed up when they needed something. Growing up in suburban Boston, my childhood looked normal from the outside. Our modest two-story colonial housed 5 people. My father, Gerald, a construction company owner with traditional views. My mother, Dorothy, who abandoned her teaching career to be a homemaker. My older brother, Warren, who could do no wrong. My younger sister, Pamela, the family peacekeeper. And me, the middle child who never quite fit the mold. From early on, my academic achievements were treated as an inconvenience. When I skipped a grade in elementary school, my parents worried about me showing off. When I won the regional science fair in 7th grade, my father complained about driving me to the state competition instead of celebrating. Warren's mediocre baseball trophies commanded prime real estate on our mantle, while my academic awards were tucked away in a desk drawer. Only my grandmother Eleanor saw my potential. A former librarian with a sharp mind, she would slip me books about female scientists and entrepreneurs whenever she visited. Your brain is a gift, Heather, she would whisper. Never apologize for it. She saved her modest pension to buy me my first computer when I turned 13, much to my father's disapproval. Girls should focus on practical skills, he would say during dinner. All this computer nonsense is just a distraction from finding a good husband and learning to run a household. My mother would nod along, occasionally shooting me sympathetic glances, but never contradicting him. High school only widened the divide. While Pamela joined cheerleading and Warren followed in our father's footsteps playing football, I founded the computer club and spent weekends coding. My parents attended every one of Warren's games and Pamela's performances, but never once showed up for technology competitions where I excelled. The breaking point came during my senior year when college applications went out. I had been accepted to 5 prestigious programs in computer science, including MIT with a partial scholarship. My parents had saved for all 3 children's education, but when I announced my choice, my father slammed his fist on the table. Computer science? For what? So you can waste 4 years and end up as someone's secretary anyway, he shouted. I'm not paying for that. If you want to throw away your future on some fantasy, you can pay for it yourself. My mother, as usual, stayed silent. Warren smirked from across the table while Pamela studied her plate. That night, I called grandmother Eleanor in tears. Apply for every scholarship. Work every job you can find and prove them wrong, she told me. Some people can't recognize brilliance when it's right in front of them. And that's exactly what I did. For 4 years, I juggled 3 jobs simultaneously. I worked mornings at a coffee shop near campus, afternoons in the university IT department, and weekends waitressing at a busy restaurant. I slept 4 hours a night, maintained a 3.9 GPA, and never asked my parents for a dime. During my sophomore year, I created a small software program that helped local businesses manage inventory more efficiently. It wasn't revolutionary, but a few companies paid me for customized versions, which eased my financial burden slightly. Holiday visits became increasingly tense. When relatives asked about my studies, my father would change the subject. If I mentioned a programming project, my brother would roll his eyes and interrupt with news about the family business. My mother would quickly serve dessert or suggest board games, anything to move past my achievements. Through it all, grandmother Eleanor remained my champion. Too frail to visit often, she would call weekly, listening intently as I explained algorithms and database structures she didn't fully understand, but respected nonetheless. She mailed me newspaper clippings about women in technology and sent small checks with notes saying, "For your future empire." Those small gestures kept me going when exhaustion and doubt crept in. As graduation approached, I secured an interview with a promising startup in San Francisco. The position offered stock options instead of a high salary, but I recognized the company's potential. When I called home with the news, my father scoffed. "Real companies pay real salaries," he said. "But you always know better, don't you?" Little did I know that this dismissal would be one of the last conversations we would have for years to come. I graduated with honors in computer science. My name announced to polite applause from the audience. From my seat, I could see my grandmother Eleanor beaming proudly, her health visibly declining, but her spirit undimmed. My parents and siblings attended out of obligation, their expressions neutral as I crossed the stage. At the family dinner afterward, conversation revolved around Warren's recent promotion at our father's construction company and Pamela's engagement to her college boyfriend. 2 weeks later, I packed everything I owned into my ancient Honda Civic and drove across the country to San Francisco. The startup offered creative freedom and the chance to build something revolutionary. Even if the salary barely covered my rent for a tiny studio apartment shared with 2 other programmers. 3 months into my new job, I received the call I had been dreading. Grandmother Eleanor had passed away peacefully in her sleep. I flew back for the funeral, grief-stricken and numb. At the service, I noticed my parents controlling all arrangements, barely acknowledging my presence. When the lawyer called us for the reading of the will, my father expected everything to go to him, her only son. The room fell silent when the lawyer announced that Eleanor had left her modest savings account of $15,000 to me specifically for pursuing dreams others may not understand. My father's face reddened with anger, my mother's lips thinned to a disapproving line, and Warren muttered something about manipulation. "She always did favor you," my father said coldly as we left the office. "I suppose you're satisfied now." That night, alone in my childhood bedroom, I made a decision. The money wasn't enough to make me wealthy, but it was enough to begin. I would use my grandmother's final gift to start my own company, to build something that would honor her belief in me. I returned to San Francisco with renewed purpose. But the family fracture had deepened beyond repair. 2 months later, my cousin Jennifer was getting married. I waited for an invitation that never came. Through social media, I discovered the entire family had attended a lavish ceremony at a country club near Boston. There were photos of Warren giving a toast, Pamela as a bridesmaid, my parents dancing. Everyone was there except me. When I called my mother to ask why I hadn't been invited, her explanation cut deeper than the exclusion itself. "We just thought you wouldn't fit in anymore, Heather," she said with practiced casualness. "You're so busy with your California life and computer things." Jennifer wanted people who are still part of the family circle. "And I'm not part of that circle?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "You chose your path," she replied simply. That evening Warren called, supposedly to clear the air, but his words only confirmed what I already knew. "Look, sis, you've always been too ambitious for your own good," he said. "The family business is struggling, Dad's working overtime, and you're out there playing entrepreneur with Grandma's money. We're real people with real jobs and real problems. You just don't fit anymore." I expected Pamela, always the peacemaker, to reach out, but her silence spoke volumes. When she finally texted weeks later, it was only to ask if I would be home for Christmas, a perfunctory question with no warmth behind it. I poured my hurt into my work, using my grandmother's inheritance to incorporate my company. I developed security software that built upon my college projects, working 18-hour days and sleeping on an air mattress in my office to save money. When my parents called occasionally, conversation was superficial, and they inevitably ended with comments about getting a real job or coming to your senses. After 6 months of no contact, I made one final attempt at reconciliation. My father's 60th birthday was approaching, and I flew back to Boston, bringing an expensive bottle of scotch and hope for healing. The dinner was tense from the start. with Warren dominating conversation about the family business. When I mentioned securing my first investor, my father laughed. Playing with computers, he said dismissively. Meanwhile, Warren just secured a contract to build a whole subdivision. That's real work that feeds real families. My mother nodded along, adding, "Dear, maybe it's time to consider coming back home. There must be some nice technology companies in Boston where you could work. With a stable income, you might meet a nice man and settle down before it's too late." I looked around the table at my family, really seeing them perhaps for the first time. They didn't want my success. They wanted my surrender, my admission that they had been right all along. I placed my napkin on the table, thanked them for dinner, and walked out knowing I wouldn't be welcome until I came to my senses. As my plane took off the next morning, I realized the hardest part wasn't leaving, but accepting that I had already been gone from their lives long before I physically departed. The next 10 years passed in a blur of absence and achievement. Each exclusion stung, but each success soothed the wound. I missed Warren's children's christenings, discovering their births through distant relatives' social media. I wasn't invited to Pamela's graduation or her wedding to Thomas, a real estate developer my father apparently adored. Family reunions happened without me, holidays came and went, and gradually, the pain of exclusion dulled to a predictable ache. Meanwhile, my fledgling company struggled through its infancy. Those early days were brutal. I slept on the office floor to save rent money, showered at a nearby gym, and lived on instant ramen and coffee. 3 developers quit when I couldn't make payroll, leaving just me and my college roommate Amanda, who believed enough to work for pure equity. Our breakthrough came in the form of a devastating cyber attack on a major retailer. Our security software, with its unique approach to data protection, suddenly looked prescient rather than paranoid. A tech journal featured our solution in a cover story, and my phone began ringing with interested investors. Still, for every open door, I faced a dozen slammed in my face. Male investors questioned if I really understood the technical aspects of my own creation. Others suggested I find a male CEO as the face of the company. One particularly memorable venture capitalist patted my hand and said, "Sweetheart, security software isn't really a woman's field." I kept a journal of every rejection, every dismissal, every condescending remark. Late at night, when doubt crept in, I would read my grandmother's letters and remember her belief in me. "Some people can't see the future," she had written, "but that doesn't mean you shouldn't build it anyway." The turning point came when Patricia Blackwell, one of the few female executives at a major tech corporation, saw our presentation at a conference. While others networked at the reception, I stayed behind to fix a glitch in our demo. Patricia returned for her forgotten phone and found me coding. "Most CEOs would have delegated that," she remarked, watching me work. "Most CEOs didn't build their product line by line," I replied without looking up. She laughed and sat down beside me. 2 hours later, we had the framework for a partnership that would change everything. Her company didn't acquire us, but integrated our security solutions into their global platform, giving us instant credibility and cash flow. Suddenly, we were expanding. I hired 10 people, then 50, then over 200. We moved from our cramped office to an entire floor in a downtown high-rise. I graduated from sleeping on the floor to a studio apartment, then a luxury condo overlooking the bay. Stock options that once seemed worthless became worth millions when we went public 3 years later. Industry recognition followed. I was named to 40 under 40 lists and invited to speak at conferences. Magazines featured our company's innovative culture and my journey from coding alone to leading a team of hundreds. With each achievement, I waited for some acknowledgement from my family that never came. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned bits and pieces about their lives. Warren had taken over the family construction business entirely, though rumors suggested it was struggling to adapt to changing markets. My parents had moved to a smaller house, downsizing after my father's partial retirement. Pamela had 2 children and worked part-time at an interior design firm. Once, I heard they had dismissed my success as lucky at a family gathering, with my father adding that these internet companies are just bubbles waiting to burst. The comment reached me through a cousin who had married into the family and didn't understand the deep rift. On my mother's 60th birthday, I sent an expensive bracelet from Tiffany's with a simple card wishing her well. 2 weeks later, it arrived back at my office, rewrapped with a note saying, "We don't need your charity." A phone call would have meant more than expensive gifts. I stopped trying after that. Instead, I built a new kind of family. My executive team celebrated holidays together. I hosted Thanksgiving for employees who couldn't travel home. Amanda, now my CFO, became the sister I had lost in Pamela. My assistant Kyle knew more about my daily life than anyone who shared my DNA. Then I met Gabriel at a charity gala. A marketing executive with kind eyes and an easy laugh. He asked about my company's mission before my market cap. On our third date, when I cautiously mentioned my family situation, expecting judgment, he simply took my hand and said, "Their loss is immeasurable." 6 months later, we moved in together. With Gabriel's encouragement, I created an innovation hub for women in technology, funding scholarships and mentorship programs. We bought a hillside mansion with views of the entire bay, designing each room to feel like the warm, supportive home I had always wanted rather than the cold showplace my wealth could have purchased. Through it all, the family-shaped hole remained, smaller, but never quite closed. On quiet nights, I sometimes wondered if they ever regretted their choices as much as I regretted that they had made them. The Sunday morning that changed everything began peacefully enough. Gabriel and I were enjoying coffee on our terrace overlooking the bay, discussing plans to expand my foundation's mentorship program to rural areas. The spring air carried the scent of blooming jasmine from our garden, and for a moment, life felt perfectly aligned. Then my phone buzzed with a security alert. Someone had pressed the intercom at our front gate. I checked the camera feed and nearly dropped my mug. Standing at the entrance to our property was my entire family. My father, Gerald, now noticeably older with thinning white hair, stood at the front. Beside him, my mother, Dorothy, fidgeted with her purse strap. Warren, heavier than I remembered, had his arm around his wife with their 2 children fidgeting beside them. Pamela stood slightly apart, looking uncomfortable, her husband Thomas checking his watch impatiently. Behind them, aunts, uncles, and cousins I hadn't seen in a decade shifted nervously. My heart hammered against my ribs, and my hands trembled so badly that Gabriel gently took the phone from me. "Your family?" he asked quietly, though he knew the answer. I had shown him old photos once, relics from another lifetime. I nodded, unable to speak. "You don't have to see them," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "Not after everything they've done." For a long moment, I considered exactly that. I could tell the security system to inform them I wasn't available. I could pretend I wasn't home. After 10 years of silence, I owed them nothing. Yet something pulled me toward the gate, toward the confrontation that had been brewing for a decade. Perhaps it was curiosity, perhaps a need for closure, or perhaps some stubborn part of me still wanted them to see exactly what their rejection had failed to prevent. "I need to do this," I said finally. "But would you stay close?" Gabriel squeezed my hand. "Right behind you every step." I descended our grand staircase slowly, giving myself time to compose my emotions. The marble foyer with its soaring ceiling had intimidated most first-time visitors, and I wondered fleetingly what my status-conscious father would think of it. Through the security monitors, I could see their expressions as they took in the manicured grounds, the fountain courtyard, the architectural details of what magazines had recently called Silicon Valley's most elegant new estate. My finger hovered over the intercom button for a moment before I decided a more direct approach was needed. I opened the front door and walked down the path to the gate myself, conscious of how different I must look to them now. The awkward, exhausted girl trying to prove herself had been replaced by a woman confident in her achievements, dressed casually but expensively, with the unmistakable bearing of someone accustomed to commanding rooms. I entered the code and the gates swung open. For a moment, no one spoke. My father recovered first, pasting on a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Heather, sweetheart," he said, stepping forward as if the last decade had been merely a busy week. "What a beautiful place you have here." My mother moved next, arms outstretched for a hug that felt mechanical. "You look well," she whispered, her eyes darting past me to assess the house. Warren gave a low whistle, his gaze calculating. "Prime real estate. This must have cost a fortune. You've done all right for yourself, sis." Pamela barely met my eyes, murmuring a quiet hello while keeping her children close. The extended family hung back, some offering awkward waves, others openly gawking at the property. I stood my ground, neither inviting them in nor turning them away yet. 10 years of emotions threatened to spill out, but I kept my voice steady as I stated the simple truth. 10 years is a long time to suddenly remember your daughter exists, I said, watching their faces carefully. My father's smile faltered. My mother's eyes dropped to her shoes. Warren shifted uncomfortably while Pamela looked like she wanted the earth to swallow her whole. "Now, honey," my father started, his businessman voice taking over, "we've all been busy. You with your company, us with the family business. Time just gets away from you." 10 years worth of time? I asked quietly. Including 3 family reunions, 6 Christmases, 4 Thanksgivings, 2 weddings, and the births of 4 children. The silence that followed confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't a reconciliation. This was a mission. Yet curiosity won out over caution. "You might as well come in and tell me why you're really here," I said, turning back toward the house without waiting for their response. Gabriel waited at the door, and I introduced him briefly as my partner. If my parents were surprised or disapproving of my unmarried status, they hid it well, too busy taking in the cathedral ceilings and custom artwork in the foyer. "Would you like a tour?" I offered. Not out of hospitality, but a desire to control this strange reunion on my terms. They nodded eagerly, and I led them through rooms that told the story of the life they had missed. The state-of-the-art kitchen where Gabriel and I hosted dinner parties for friends who had become family. The library filled with books on technology, business, and psychology, with a special shelf holding my grandmother Eleanor's modest collection, saved from being discarded after her death. I showed them my home office, where billion-dollar ideas had been born, with its wall of awards and magazine covers they had never mentioned receiving. There was the sunroom where I mentored young female programmers, and the garden where I found peace after stressful days. Throughout the tour, I noted their reactions. My father assessed everything by its presumed price tag. My mother commented repeatedly on how fancy everything was, a word laced with subtle disapproval of such showing off. Warren seemed to be mentally calculating my net worth, while Pamela remained largely silent, occasionally redirecting her curious children. Most telling were the photographs displayed throughout the house. Pictures of Gabriel and me traveling the world. Images of company milestones and charity events. Photos with famous business leaders and tech innovators. Not a single image of my biological family appeared anywhere. A fact my mother noted with a pained expression she quickly masked. We settled in the living room with its panoramic views of the bay. My father declined coffee but accepted scotch, which he sipped appreciatively while commenting on its probable cost. An uncomfortable silence fell until Gabriel excused himself to take a work call, squeezing my shoulder supportively as he left. With his departure, my father finally revealed their purpose. "Heather, we've been following your success from afar," he began. His tone suggesting this was a compliment rather than an admission of stalking my press coverage. "We're all very proud of what you've accomplished." I remained silent, waiting for the true purpose of this visit. "The thing is," he continued, glancing at Warren for support, "the family business has hit some rough patches. The economy, you know. And construction isn't what it used to be." Warren jumped in, his voice artificially casual. "The bank is foreclosing on our main office building, and we're facing some cash flow issues. Temporary, of course." My father leaned forward, placing his empty glass on a coaster. "We were hoping you might consider helping out the family." Just a small loan to get us through this rough patch. 3 million would clear our immediate debts and give us breathing room to restructure. There it was. 10 years of silence broken not by love or regret, but by financial desperation. Not even a single phone call or email had preceded this ambush. Just the expectation that blood would automatically open my checkbook, regardless of how that blood had been disregarded for a decade. I see, I said quietly, looking around at the family who had found their way to my door only when they needed something. A small loan of $3 million. Pamela finally spoke up. Her voice soft. We wouldn't ask if it wasn't important, Heather. The business supports the whole family. I nodded slowly, processing their request while a decade of hurt crystallized into perfect clarity. Before we discuss money, I'd like to understand something. Why now, after 10 years of complete silence? My question hung in the air like a physical presence. My father cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with being challenged. Now, Heather, my mother interjected, reaching for my hand, which I subtly moved away. We've always loved you. We just thought you were busy building your career, and we didn't want to interfere. Too busy for a phone call on my birthday? Too busy to be invited to family Christmas? Too busy to know my nieces and nephews were born? I asked, keeping my voice calm despite the emotions churning inside. Warren shifted in his seat, his earlier confidence faltering. Come on, sis. You were the one who moved across the country. You were always working. We figured you had your own life out here. I did, I agreed. I built a life here because I wasn't welcome in yours anymore. Let's be honest with each other, at least this once. My father's jaw tightened, a familiar sign of his rising temper. We're here now, aren't we? Water under the bridge. Family helps family. Family, I repeated, tasting the word that had once meant everything to me. Let me tell you what I know about family from my perspective. Gabriel returned, silently taking a seat beside me, his presence giving me strength. I know that Warren's first child, Abigail, was born 8 years ago. His son Benjamin followed 2 years later. I sent gifts for both from information I gathered through distant relatives. The packages were never acknowledged. Warren had the decency to look embarrassed. I know Pamela graduated with honors in interior design 6 years ago. She married Thomas a year later in Cape Cod. I learned about both through social media because I wasn't invited to either event. Pamela stared at her hands, unable to meet my gaze. I know there have been 3 family reunions at Lake Winnipesaukee, Thanksgiving at Aunt Judith's farm every year, Christmas rotating between your houses, 4th of July barbecues, Easter brunches. I turned to my father directly. I know you tried to hide grandmother Eleanor's funeral arrangements from me, but her neighbor called to tell me. I sat in the back row while you pretended not to see me. His face reddened, but he remained silent. I know from cousin Alexandra that you told the extended family I was too busy with my California life to attend family functions, when in reality I was never invited. I know you referred to my company as a hobby until it went public, and then suddenly it became lucky timing rather than years of 80-hour weeks and sacrifices. My mother's eyes filled with tears, but I recognized the manipulation tactic from childhood. Whenever confronted with uncomfortable truths, her tears had always redirected sympathy and deflected accountability. Heather, we made mistakes, she said, voice quavering. We're not perfect parents. This isn't about perfect. I replied evenly. This is about basic respect and honesty. You didn't just lose touch with me. You deliberately excluded me from the family because I chose a path you didn't approve of. And now you're here because that same path led to financial success you want access to. My father's temper finally broke through his facade. Now you listen here, he said, voice rising. We raised you, put food on the table, clothes on your back. You owe this family. Gabriel tensed beside me but respected my silent signal to let me handle this. I owed you respect as my parents. And I gave that until it became clear it wouldn't be reciprocated. I owed you gratitude for raising me, which I expressed repeatedly while being told my career was a waste of time. What I don't owe you is $3 million because you and Warren mismanaged the family business. Warren stood up, face flushing. That's rich coming from you. Sitting in your mansion while family struggles. Always thought you were better than us, didn't you? Too smart, too special for regular work. I never thought I was better, I said quietly. I just wanted to be accepted for who I was, not who you wanted me to be. And when that wasn't possible, I built a life where I could be valued for my mind and my work. Always so cold, Warren spat. No wonder you don't have a real family of your own. Gabriel stood then, his normally gentle demeanor hardened. I think that's enough. Heather has shown remarkable restraint considering how you've treated her. You came to her home after a decade of silence asking for millions, and you have the audacity to insult her? Pamela finally found her voice, stepping into her familiar peacekeeper role. Please, everyone calm down. We're family. We should be able to work through this. I turned to my sister. The betrayal perhaps most painful from her. Pamela, in 10 years, you sent me 3 text messages. No calls, no visits. When did you decide I wasn't worth keeping as a sister? Her face crumpled. I was caught in the middle, Heather. You know how Dad and Warren are. I had my own family to think about. And yet here you are, asking for money rather than reconciliation, I observed. The extended family members who had remained largely silent now looked deeply uncomfortable, some clearly regretting their participation in this ambush. My father, realizing his anger wasn't achieving the desired outcome, switched tactics. Heather, whatever issues we've had, we're still family. Blood is thicker than water. $3 million is nothing to someone like you now, but it would save everyone's livelihoods. I took a deep breath, centering myself. You're right about one thing. We are connected by blood. But family is about more than DNA. It's about showing up, supporting each other through difficulties, celebrating successes together, and respecting differences. For 10 years, you showed me exactly where I stood in your definition of family. I was an outsider until you needed something from me. So that's it, my father demanded. You're turning your back on family when we need help? Proving how selfish you've become with all this success? The accusation of selfishness from the man who had rejected me for pursuing my dreams was the final straw. With perfect calm, I stood up. I think it's time for you to leave, I said. I'm not the daughter who walked away. I'm the daughter who was pushed out and told not to come back until I conformed to your expectations. I built this life despite your absence, not because of your support. My mother began crying in earnest now, while my father's face darkened with anger. Warren muttered something about cold-hearted tech people as he gathered his children. Pamela looked torn, opening her mouth to speak before closing it again. As they collected themselves to leave, my father delivered what he clearly thought was a devastating parting shot. Don't bother calling us again if this is how you treat family. I walked them to the door, maintaining my composure through sheer determination. You haven't called me in 10 years anyway, Dad. I'm just maintaining the status quo you established. The shocked silence that followed told me they had expected wealth to make me desperate for their approval, willing to pay any price for reconciliation. Instead, they found a woman who had learned her worth wasn't determined by their validation. As the gate closed behind them, I felt a strange mixture of grief and relief wash over me. The family I had lost and the family I had outgrown were driving away, leaving me standing in the doorway of the home I had built without them. Once the gate closed behind my family's caravan of cars, the emotional dam I had carefully maintained finally broke. My hands trembled as I closed the front door, and tears I had refused to shed in their presence now flowed freely. Gabriel wrapped his arms around me without a word, letting me process the complex storm of emotions their visit had unleashed. They only came because they needed money, I said finally, my voice muffled against his shoulder. 10 years of nothing. And then they show up expecting millions. Gabriel led me to the kitchen, pouring us both glasses of wine with hands steadier than my own. They showed exactly who they are today, he said gently. And you showed exactly who you've become despite them. That evening, as I tried to make sense of the encounter, my phone rang with an unfamiliar local number. It was my cousin Stephanie, who hadn't been part of the group that morning. Heather, I heard what happened, she began awkwardly. I just wanted you to know that some of us didn't know the full story. Your parents told everyone you wanted distance from the family to focus on your career. They said you declined invitations and were too busy for family events. The revelation wasn't entirely surprising, but hearing it confirmed still stung. They never invited me to anything, Stephanie. Not once in 10 years. I'm sorry, she said, sounding genuinely remorseful. A lot of us just accepted what we were told. It wasn't right. Over the next few days, I received similar calls from 2 aunts and another cousin, each expressing shock at learning the truth. It seemed my parents and Warren had crafted a narrative where I had abandoned the family, not the other way around. While some relatives expressed genuine regret, others clearly sided with my parents, believing that family loyalty should trump all other considerations, including a decade of exclusion. A month after their visit, I learned through business channels that the family construction company had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The news brought complicated feelings. Part of me felt vindicated that their financial crisis was real and not a manipulation tactic. Another part felt sadness for the employees who would lose their livelihoods because of my father's and brother's mismanagement. With Gabriel's support, I began therapy to process the complex family trauma that their visit had resurfaced. My therapist helped me understand that grief for the family relationship I never had was valid, even as I celebrated the life and success I had built. You're mourning the family you deserved but didn't get, she explained during one particularly difficult session. That grief can coexist with pride in your resilience. 6 months after the confrontation, Gabriel proposed during a weekend trip to Big Sur. As we planned our wedding, we talked about the family we wanted to create together, one built on mutual respect and unconditional support rather than conformity and conditions. Our children will never have to earn our love by following a predetermined path, I promised as we discussed starting a family. They'll know they're valued for exactly who they are. With my newfound financial and emotional clarity, I established a scholarship foundation for first-generation college women pursuing careers in technology, especially those without family support. The Eleanor Wright Memorial Scholarship, named for my grandmother, covered not just tuition but living expenses, understanding that financial pressure often forced talented women to abandon their dreams. I also created a broader foundation supporting young entrepreneurs from unsupportive backgrounds, providing both funding and mentorship. Each time I met with these determined young people, I saw echoes of my own journey and found healing in helping them navigate paths similar to mine. Setting boundaries with toxic family members proved challenging but necessary. I decided that I would not close the door entirely, but any relationship moving forward would require acknowledgement of past behavior and genuine remorse, not just financial need or surface pleasantries. 2 months after the bankruptcy filing, my Aunt Linda reached out with a sincere apology for believing the narrative my parents had created. We began rebuilding a relationship based on honest communication and mutual respect. 2 cousins followed, reconnecting without the poisonous family dynamics that had separated us. That Thanksgiving, instead of dwelling on past exclusions, Gabriel and I hosted our first chosen family gathering. Our home filled with friends, colleagues, scholarship recipients, and the few biological relatives who had demonstrated genuine care. The warmth and laughter in our dining room that evening healed something I hadn't realized was still broken. A week later, Pamela appeared at our gate alone, without Thomas or the children. Our security system announced her arrival, and I hesitated before letting her in. She sat nervously in our living room, clearly uncomfortable but determined. I need help, she admitted bluntly. Not for Dad or Warren or the business. For my kids' college funds. Thomas and I are separating, and I'm worried about their future. I studied my sister, looking for signs of the familial manipulation I had grown accustomed to. Instead, I saw genuine fear and maternal concern. Financial help comes after emotional honesty, Pamela, I said quietly. Why did you stay silent for 10 years? What followed was a difficult but necessary conversation. Pamela broke down, admitting she had been a coward, afraid of becoming the next family outcast if she maintained a relationship with me against our father's wishes. I told myself you were doing fine without us, she confessed. That you had this amazing life and career and didn't need family dragging you down. But the truth is, I was protecting myself at your expense, and I'm so sorry, Heather. Unlike my parents' performative remorse, Pamela's apology came with acknowledgement of specific actions and genuine regret. We cried together, beginning the slow process of rebuilding what had been lost. I didn't give Pamela the money that day. Instead, I helped her find a job using her interior design skills at a friend's architectural firm. I established college funds for her children that she couldn't access for any other purpose, ensuring my niece and nephew would have educational opportunities regardless of family dynamics. My parents and Warren remained entrenched in their positions, refusing to acknowledge any wrongdoing. Through mutual connections, I learned they interpreted my refusal to provide a bailout as final proof of my abandonment of family values. The construction company was sold off in pieces, with my father forced into full retirement and Warren scrambling for employment with competitors. Gabriel helped me see that some relationships simply couldn't be salvaged, at least not without fundamental changes that my father and brother seemed unwilling to make. You can leave the door cracked open, he advised, without expecting anyone to walk through it. With his unwavering support, I navigated the emotional aftermath of confronting my past while building toward my future. Together, we found ways to honor the healing process without letting it consume us. In a final act that brought me unexpected peace, I anonymously funded severance packages for the longtime employees of my father's company, many of whom had families depending on their income. They would never know the money came from the daughter their boss had rejected, but knowing they wouldn't suffer for his mistakes lightened something in my heart. Family is who shows up, Gabriel reminded me one evening as we watched the sunset from our terrace. And you've created a beautiful one. Looking around at the life we'd built together, I finally believed him. 2 years passed quickly, bringing changes I could never have anticipated that Sunday morning when my family appeared at our gate. Our hillside mansion, once a symbol of success achieved despite rejection, transformed into something more meaningful, a gathering place for the family we had chosen and created. Today, the dining room that had witnessed my family's desperate request for money now hosted a very different gathering. Gabriel, now my husband of 18 months, was grilling on the terrace. My sister Pamela, who had slowly earned back my trust, was setting the table with her children, who now called me Aunt Heather with genuine affection. Cousin Stephanie and her husband chatted with friends from my foundation. 2 of my earliest employees, now executives in their own right, debated technology trends with scholarship recipients we were mentoring. In a corner of the living room stood a small memorial table with my grandmother Eleanor's photograph surrounded by candles. Beside it, I had framed her letters to me, preserving the wisdom that had sustained me through the darkest times. We had established a tradition of toasting her memory at every gathering, acknowledging that her belief in me had been the seed from which everything grew. My parents and Warren remained absent from our lives, maintaining their distance after the final confrontation. Occasional updates filtered through Pamela or distant relatives. My father's health had declined after losing his business, though he refused to acknowledge any connection between his stress and his treatment of family members. Warren had found work with a competitor, but struggled with the transition from owner's son to middle management. Neither had attempted to contact me directly, though I knew through Pamela that they followed news of my company's continued success with complicated emotions. I had left the door open for reconciliation on my terms, acknowledgement of past behavior, genuine remorse, and commitment to respectful boundaries moving forward. So far, their pride had prevented them from taking those steps. I had made peace with the possibility that they never would. My tech company had continued its growth trajectory, but with a conscious focus on mentoring others rather than merely accumulating wealth. We had established a dedicated division for supporting women and minorities in technology, providing not just funding but structural support and advocacy within an industry still struggling with inclusion. The scholarship program had already produced remarkable success stories. 19 young women from backgrounds similar to mine had completed degrees in technology fields, many returning as mentors for the next generation. Watching them overcome obstacles with support I never had brought a different kind of fulfillment than any business achievement. Pamela's journey from enabler to independent woman had been particularly rewarding to witness. After years of accepting our father's domineering ways and our mother's passive reinforcement, she had found her voice through therapy and financial independence. The interior design career that had once been treated as a cute hobby by our family now supported her and her children comfortably. More importantly, she had learned to stand against family toxicity rather than perpetuating it. The kids asked about Grandpa yesterday, she mentioned quietly as we prepared dessert in the kitchen, away from the lively gathering. I told them that sometimes adults make choices that hurt other people, and until they can acknowledge that hurt, it's okay to keep some distance. I squeezed her hand, grateful for her growth and the healing in our relationship. You're breaking the cycle, Pam. That's the most important gift you can give them. Our healing journey as sisters hadn't been instantaneous or without setbacks. We had needed to rebuild trust slowly, acknowledging painful truths rather than glossing over them with platitudes about blood and family. The relationship we now shared was stronger for its honesty, built on who we chose to be rather than merely who we were born to be. Gabriel joined us, wrapping an arm around my waist as he stole a strawberry from the dessert tray. Everyone's asking when we're making our announcement, he whispered with a smile. My hand instinctively moved to my stomach, still flat but harboring our greatest adventure yet. At 3 months pregnant, we had only told Pamela and our closest friends, wanting to savor the private joy before sharing it widely. Let's do it now, I decided, suddenly eager to celebrate this new chapter with our chosen family. The announcement was met with cheers, hugs, and a few happy tears. As congratulations flowed, I found myself reflecting on the profound transformation of my journey. The exclusion that had once defined my family narrative had ultimately strengthened my determination to create something different. The very rejection that had wounded me so deeply had forced me to build resilience I might never have discovered otherwise. Later that evening, as our guests departed with warm embraces rather than the cold formality of my childhood family gatherings, Gabriel and I sat on our terrace under the stars. What are you thinking about? He asked, noticing my contemplative mood. How exclusion ultimately led to expansion, I replied. If they hadn't pushed me away, I might never have built all this. I might have conformed to their expectations, taken a sensible job, lived a smaller life. Are you saying you're grateful they rejected you? He asked, surprised. Not grateful for the pain, I clarified, but grateful for what it taught me about self-worth not being tied to others' approval, about how family can be chosen rather than merely inherited, about the freedom that comes from building your life on your own terms. In the 2 years since my biological family had appeared at our gate seeking financial rescue, I had expanded my foundation's mission to include family reconciliation programs, helping others navigate complex family dynamics with professional support. Not every relationship could or should be saved, but many could be transformed through honest communication and clear boundaries. As my hand rested on my stomach, I made silent promises to our growing child. They would know unconditional love that celebrated their uniqueness rather than trying to reshape it. They would understand that worth comes from character and kindness, not conformity or achievement. They would learn that family is defined by how people treat each other, not merely by shared DNA. Home isn't where you're from, I said softly to Gabriel as we watched the city lights twinkling below our hillside sanctuary. It's where you're valued for exactly who you are. The family that had once shunned me from their reunions had inadvertently given me the greatest gift, the freedom to create a life and legacy built on authenticity rather than approval seeking. In finding my own path, I had discovered that the mansion that impressed them wasn't made of stone and glass, but of resilience, integrity, and the courage to stand firm in my truth. Have you ever had to create boundaries with family who only showed up when they needed something? What would you have done in my situation? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience and self-discovery. Share this video with someone who might need to be reminded that their worth isn't determined by family approval. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember that sometimes the family you create is more powerful than the one you were born into.